Good morning, everybody. John Spiegel here for GAI Insights and the Gen AI News Briefing. We have a busy news day. We have new announcements from Microsoft for Copilot. We've got some interesting new stuff from McKinsey about how business-to-business sales are getting rocketed by using generative AI, and an amazing new announcement from Grok, building a massive data center in Saudi Arabia, and more. All right. We have Luda, Adam, and Tim this morning, so it should be a good day. And let's begin. Ankash is not joining us, so let's begin with the Microsoft apps for getting more useful Copilot features. Let me introduce the article a little bit. And this one, some nice little videos that talk about how Microsoft is adding things like helping to create stories in PowerPoint, the integration of Python in Excel to be able to do sophisticated analysis, storytelling in Word, and announcement today now available within the Microsoft suite. So let's see, who did we have in terms
That's
of
me, John.
Pardon me?
That's me.
All right, Adam, go for it.
Hey, good morning. You've stolen my thunder there, mate.
Well, no, I was just trying to introduce.
You said too much. No, I'm joking. So this news out of Microsoft today, I will say, is essential. Satya Nadella called it basically the Copilot is the UI for AI, which of course is very catchy. But he characterized today's announcements as Copilot Wave 2. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. It's definitely worth catching up on this. Fairly far down in this article is actually a link. They mentioned the announcement of BizChat and Copilot pages as well. And you can see that here. It's another article, another piece of news today. But just, John, as you mentioned, I mean, throughout the M365 suite, we have Python and Excel for all that data analysis. You can build PowerPoint from scratch using company templates and brand-approved images from a SharePoint library, so we'll be able to get a lot more consistency out of the tool. Upgrades to Teams, new features in Outlook and Word. So that across the board is, they're trying to make the $30 a month more valuable and more enticing. And I'm sure in the months and years to come, we're going to just see them continue to embed this thing deeper and deeper into the suite. But that other piece of news about the BizChat, this is really, really interesting. It's a collaborative AI playground. They describe it as a dynamic, persistent canvas designed for multiplayer AI collaboration. And the idea is you can actually start basically in a chat on the web and do some research, make a page from it, share it with your colleagues, and then real time, like when you're editing a Word document together, see them adding research, collaborating together. You can bring in project plans. You can work on, customer documents together. So it's really trying to bring the team, I guess, together across an organization in what they characterize as the human AI human interface. Which is very much what we're all about as well, which is keeping that human in the loop. So tons of news out of Microsoft today, absolutely worth paying attention to.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly powerful, and we'll see later in an article about Slack. When you start thinking about the conversational interface among human cognitors and machine cognitors, if you will, human agents, machine agents, it's the conversation as the modality, and to have that shared space, whether it's Slack or BizChat or whatever, I think is going to be incredibly important, because that's, when you think about social media, that really is the canvas and the backdrop, is that context for a conversation. You know what I mean? So it's, I think it's incredibly powerful. What do others think? We're going for the big E on this one so far.
I think, I guess I can go with essential because Microsoft is such an important company and so many people have Microsoft. If you're a Google company, it's not that, it's interesting in the features they put in, but not that relevant. So I was going to go more important, but I can see essential just because they're such an important company in the market. I'm glad they're adding things. This is Microsoft's general approach and the technology industry's general approach, where they call it move fast and break things. What they really mean is move fast and put out a crappy product, and then eventually figure out how to make one that's at least okay. And, that's where we're headed here. So Microsoft Copilot it came out as an okay product. I won't even call it crappy. It was okay. I think there are many critiques one could make. The biggest critique is that it's 18,000 different products. And Paul remembers probably when we had the first learning lab, we lost Paul. but those were at the first learning lab, or one of the first learning labs where we had the Microsoft product manager on. He talked about the 35 different Copilots.
Literally, yeah.
There's an old rule of user interface called "Don't create modes. Don't create different modes if you don't need to," and that's exactly what they've done. So, for instance, I'm going to try this out, but one of the things you can't do in PowerPoint is give it a wordy PowerPoint and say, make this half the size, which is one of the primary things you do in Microsoft Word. And you can't do that in PowerPoint. So anyway, I could go on and on and on, but this is definitely a series of good improvements. I agree that the Pages thing could be really interesting. So important at least, and I can be arm twisted into essential.
Yeah, I was also important rather than essential, because I think there's a lot of hesitation to use it because it wasn't very helpful before. So all these features need to be tried before they can be believed. Let's put it this way. So, but it is Microsoft, and they are charging $30 and people are not paying yet. So we'll have to see. That's why I'm a little skeptical. That's why I was going important.
Paul, what do you come in on this one?
I'll support either one. I mean, it's very clear. I've talked to dozens of companies the last 3 weeks here. They do not see the ROI in this. All the people I talk with who say they love it, I say, great. And I take my notebook out and I say, tell me specifically how you're using it. And very few people can, other than, meeting summaries here. So I do think it's a great step forward. I do think it's experimentation. We're early. It is really important for the AI leader, because 95% of them are using Microsoft in their shops. And for them to get organizational support, they need people to use it for their personal productivity tools. So I think for that, it really leans towards essential.
Yeah. And by the way, I think the Python stuff in Excel could be really incredible.
Of course.
Again, if your company uses a lot of Excel, which a lot of companies do. So,
yeah. And talk about the weakest of the products. I would say Google Sheets is so much weaker than Excel.
Yeah.
That competition. And the other thing, that there's over 50%, I've heard that well over 50% of the information in spreadsheets is not numeric. So I think that is, I would assert, for the non-programmer, the spreadsheet is the programming language. And to add, that is the place where people program. And so to add Python on the back of that as the, incremental power, enhancer I think that's going to be the entry point for end user, for citizen in the near term, for citizen programmers going that next level up to really use AI to get more function. It's going to come through the spreadsheet, and you're not going to be able to do it on Google Docs right now. You can do it on Excel. So essentially it is. All right. Next.
And John, before you go on, I'd love to encourage our audience, if you've got comments on this or thoughts, please put them in comments and let us know. Thanks.
Absolutely. And also don't forget to subscribe and like our channel if this is useful. All right. Next. Scaling the state of play in AI. We have Ethan Mollick doing what I think is a good job of laying out a couple of different things. One is to do the categorization of the different model sizes. Second is to show that each model generation, the way he defines them, essentially takes an order of magnitude more investment and compute power to generate something. And he says we're at models, level 2 models. And then he puts together the very beginning of it, and this one he isn't so thoughtful on, but it's an interesting idea to talk about how inference, post-model inference, which is now being done in the context of the new release of OpenAI, where it's doing a lot of thinking before it responds, doing chain of thought reasoning and other inference activities on a trained model to get a better result. And he posits at the end, as I say, what my grandmother used to say was a lick and a promise. He just throws out this idea of, hey, maybe there's a thinking scaling law that is after the model is done. And he also does a nice job of laying out the 3 different models on 3 different tasks. So what do you think here? Who do we have on this one? We have
Tim.
Tim, what'd you think?
So I don't do this often, but I'm going to call this essential.
Whoa, ho, hey, ho.
This is,
gentlemen.
Ethan's an
essential.
excellent writer, number one. So this is a well-written article that is fairly dense and fairly long, but contains a lot of helpful information. And to your point, I think there are two big points. One is the analysis of scale in training is excellent and succinct. And so I think for an AI leader, you got to know this stuff. And it's really helpful also to put in perspective, again, as we've been saying forever, and I pound the table on this every day, things are going to change much, much more than they already have. If you think about 2 more orders of magnitude improvement in these models, it's just staggering to think about how much better they'll be than they already are. And they're going to, I think he's right, they're easily going to get through a couple of more iterations. And that's going to mean the capability is going to go up. And the price, by the way, that means, of course, of the current models, which are already pretty capable, will undoubtedly go down.
Yes.
These are big issues if you're an AI leader to keep in mind as you roll through this stuff. The other thing is that he makes the point, again, I won't call it super science, but it's good enough for this level of comparing the top models and basically making the case that the top models are all pretty close already. And so there's this, tremendous competitive move forward in capabilities. And then the last thing about inferencing is also important. It's clear that this is the path people are, well, at least OpenAI is going on, and they've been the market leader. So we'll see where other people go. And they're really capitalizing on what we saw from Reflection and other people already, which is what people didn't know out of the box, which is, you can talk to these models and tell them to do things more intelligently, and they will.
Yeah.
So if you tell them to do things step by step, if you tell them to do things in certain ways, they actually get better. And OpenAI is just saying, well, we could put that into the model. And Ethan is abstracting that and saying, does that mean that we can spend more money on inference and get better answers when we need them? And it's a reasonable proposition, but still somewhat speculation at this point. But it also says that the demand for chips is not going to go down probably anytime in the near future. But I rate this essential.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tim, when you say that about the inferencing and so forth, that I think it was yesterday we reviewed a research article. It was doing inductive analysis of different inferencing chains. And, Luda and I thought that was pretty important in terms of how you think about, because that I think is a whole nother science of how do you use the model once trained. And we don't know what the economic.
And good news, as I said, for NVIDIA, because if it turns out to be true, because of the desire for latency, for speed in inferencing, there'll be even more demand for chips than there is for training, because people will hold their nose and put up with a longer training cycle, but they can only put up with so much latency when they're dealing with inferencing.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's also good news for Grok, which we're going to talk about.
And Grok too, all the chip makers. Yep.
John and Luda, though, I do want to note my Stanford and Son moment here when I said, "Oh my God, it's a big one." That Tim Andrews actually had an essential here. So September 17th, I have in my notebook, Adam.
Nice.
Full moon. It happens once a
Tim
year.
out of the blocks essential with very few caveats. Okay, next.
And it's enthusiasm too. I was really
enthusiasm. Wow. Yes. All right. Runway announced an API for video generating models. This article talks about how you have API access now. It's I think it's 5 cents a second for each piece of video, and they're going to indemnify users if they use the API against stolen IP or content. We have the absolutely absurd astronaut running through some graffiti, bespeckled part of Europe, it looks like, as an example. So what do you think about this? Let's see. We have,
I can take this one.
Okay, why don't you take it? Thank you, Luda.
Yes. So it's API. Runway, as you might remember, has been last valued at 1.5 billion, with investors, very renowned investors from Salesforce and the like. But they and they're announcing API. So I rated this article as optional.
Mhm.
There's a lot of competition, and it's not clear whether they have something that other players want and how they would survive. So I think it's totally optional.
All righty. I'm going for an optional myself. It's a short article. It doesn't say much. What do you think? Adam, Tim, you guys okay with that?
Optional. It's a product announcement. Interesting.
Yeah, I'll just add that Luma Labs, who also makes a very competitive video product, they announced their API and it's available now.
Yes.
Runway actually announced that you can join a wait list today. So
Yes.
if you're looking at video generation with an API, there's actually other news going on today that's also optional, but more relevant.
This doesn't even make relevant optional. Okay, next. Slack allowing users. So in this, Slack's not only creating its own AI agents, but it's allowing other ones in Salesforce, as you can see here, Workday, and so forth. And very powerful in the context of their conversational interface, in my opinion. Anyway, what did you think about this one? Let's see. I don't know. Adam, you want to take a whack at it?
It's actually Paul.
I know Paul's left us. That's why.
So I'll take a whack at it. Yeah, sure. Look, I think this is probably important. In a similar way, you could say it would be bigger news if everyone used Slack. A lot of people do use Slack, but not everyone. So in a way, it's relevant as a niche, but perhaps more important as a trend, right? Which is sort of that horizontal integration of AI capabilities into tools where you would never think that in Slack you would have access to all these other AI tools, for example. But I think we're going to see a lot more of this. Certainly some big features coming out today in terms of what you can do without leaving that platform now. So I'd say it's important news.
Yeah, I think this notion of the conversational interface is the place where agents might live. Because the beautiful thing about conversation or conversational interfaces is they're very loose integration. Right? When you talk about transaction integration for agents, you have to be sure of the environment and what data are getting passed, the security and so forth. You think about, Slack or social media and so forth. Once you're in the conversational context, the integration is very, very loose. And let me put it this way. You can get value with very, very loose integration, right? And not a lot of rules about how to integrate across conversations. So, I think it's very promising. I was leaning toward essential. No, any takers on that?
I can't see it as essential. Okay. I think it's interesting in that everybody wants to be the center of their customer's universe, and this has been true forever. And everybody can't be the center of the customer's universe. So there's a big battle going on here. Microsoft, Slack, various folks. And, honestly, I would bet on Microsoft right now because Teams is taking over the world because Microsoft owns all of the desktops in corporate America.
Yeah, give or take a Google. But yeah. All right. So we're headed for important. Luda, you good with that?
Important is, I was going.
Right. Important it is. Next. B2B sales. One of my favorite things. One of my mentors at Harvard Business School was a guy named Ben Shapiro, and his expertise was in industrial sales, and he had the most fantastic course on industrial selling. Anyway, business to business sales, and in here it shows that there's a fairly hefty adoption of AI. I think it's over 30%, and people are expecting multifaceted improvements. If you Adam, you scroll down to some of the data in terms of they're looking for productivity, they think better client service, look at this. We have 21% fully implemented. That surprised me. Is that high? And if you keep going down farther,
I can't believe it.
Well, yeah. I mean, even let's say they're off by, even if they're off by 50%, 10% would surprise. I mean, if you've ever done any work inside an industrial sales force, I was chief marketing officer at PwC for a while, and that's all business to business sales. But go back a little if you would. so you look here, efficiency, top line growth, better customer experience, better margin, and innovation. Other than that, I mean, my goodness, that is a panoply of, benefits, and they seem pretty evenly weighted. I know there's, 14 to 24. Anyway, that is in there. And then they had, I thought some additional analysis there. So, Ludo, what do you think? That's some context.
Yeah, a slight correction. The 21% implementation is not just sales, it's buying and selling. So they kind of beefed these numbers a little higher because of that. But regardless, this is quite impressive in fully implemented applications across the board. I like this article and I gave it as important. It's a little in the future, but with good examples, and imagine this and imagine that of how the sales processes and the people doing them in enterprises will shift, and how AI will help shift it into in the future. It's a futuristic projection with a lot of understanding in the field, with some examples, what would happen. So I feel that this is certainly a good read for the leaders, especially the sales ones.
Yeah,
So,
we also see, some uptake, in our sales training and so forth. We have some of these messages. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Tim.
I think I'm okay with important. This is an interesting article at a couple of levels. The brings a whole new meaning to the word empty suit potentially, because but this is inevitable, and sales is a likely big target first off because the ROI is so easy. If I decrease my cost of sales or increase my sales, I can measure that instantly, pretty easily. And certainly it will improve certain kinds of sales. There's no doubt about it. It should improve all kinds of sales. I mean, just having, a better interface to your CRM would probably improve most sales. So the ability to, a customer relationship management system like Salesforce or something like that. So the ability to have generative AI, just as we were talking about with Excel earlier, to ask simple questions of your systems is definitely going to help sales, I would imagine. And the interesting thing is they sort of, I think, gave a wink and a nod. What's the word? A wink and a nod to helping the buyers. I think this is much more helpful to the buyers in the long run. And so it's targeted at sales because McKinsey knows salespeople will pay money for their services because salespeople can measure the impact very quickly. What they point out sort of indirectly, but I think is much more important, is buyers are going to be helped a lot more than sellers, because buyers can just have their bots negotiating bots will become pretty good because they won't make the silly mistakes that humans make, and they'll just be bots talking to bots. And then we have another arms race like security, where the bots get better at talking to each other, but ultimately that's better for the customer.
Yeah, I think your characterization of business sales is a little, it's a much more human process than, and I don't think that'll go away because people are taking career risk, and so I think they're going to want a human being behind it. But yes, I've studied for a number of years the impact of expert systems on configuration of offerings, and what you said about helping the customer really translate their needs into what the company's offering is fantastic. I would also push back a little on the ease of measuring. When you have a complex sale, because I spent a lot of time, on that, and when you have a complex sale, this is a component part of a long-term relationship. You know what I mean? And so it contributes, but and most of the time it's relatively difficult to measure the impact of any effort in a business-to-business sale. That's why there's a wonderful book called Doing Deals by Bob Eccles and Dwight Crane that talks about compensation systems in investment banks. And because it's so hard, like let's say, Tim, you were running a relationship for 10 years, then you get put on something else and I sell something to them, who's really responsible for that sale? You know what I mean? And so
point taken. Yeah, that's a good point.
I
would tell you, I would push back and say, I believe bots will win because that's, bots are winning in therapy already. There are advantages to not having a human in these processes as well as disadvantages. And the cost is so overwhelming, and the data-driven insights are so overwhelming. I think that for the career risk guy, or girl, it's actually easier to do it with a bot because you have absolute ironclad data behind you. Whereas if you do a handshake deal with a salesperson, it's, well, where's the data? You got to make sure you got the data, because that's what ultimately, and the thing's got to work out. At the end of the day, things have to work out.
Nah,
Yeah.
I'll say one more thing and then let it go. But when you look at these large companies that have reciprocal relationships, that PwC is selling so much to Microsoft, and Microsoft's buying so much for PwC, and so forth. That is a complex, they call it balance of trade negotiation. I mean, a lot of big companies that are in that situation, where they're buying things from their customers, and their customers are buying things from them, and ain't no robot going to do that.
Well, we'll see what happens. We have a very good comment from Lucinda. Let's see. That she says that this is a very good set of articles, and she can't wait to read them. So this
All
is
right. So we're going for important on this one. Excellent. All right. We have Grok. Once a amazing announcement here. They're going to go for, I forget, it's 100,000, 200,000 LPUs. They're going to build in Saudi Arabia. You think about, creating a data center there. Grok has, or at least XAI, managed to build the world's largest supercomputer this year already, which is, I think, extraordinary. And then we've got Saudi Aramco, probably the only place that's non-Israel in the Middle East that the U.S. Commerce Department and security apparatus would allow this to be built. Low energy costs, obviously tremendous need, and hundreds of millions of people there. So big announcement by Grok, and they say they're going to have it up before the end of the year. So what did you think, Tim?
I think this is important, at least. I guess I would say important. Well, let me say it this way: it's hard for me to take my citizen hat off. So as a citizen, I think this is essential. As an AI leader, you could argue maybe this is even optional, but I would probably argue important, because as we were discussing earlier, what it indicates is the infinite demand for chips right now. Just breathtaking, as Paul would say. It's 20,000 chips, right, or 19,000 chips right away, up to 200,000. But even getting 19,000 chips in a data center by the end of the year, that's pretty significant. And Grok just put itself on the map, right? I mean, I don't know how much theirs cost, but similar chips are at least 40 grand to 100 grand. So you can do the math. This is hundreds of millions to billions of dollars in revenue for Grok, and the controlling presence probably in the Middle East right now, which has lots of money and lots of demand, as we've seen with the Falcon model and other things. So I'd say important for mostly in the AI leader, not going to affect them day to day unless you're in the Middle East or doing a lot of business in the Middle East. But the idea of the incredible demand for chips, unabated at this point, and a new chip maker on the map called Grok is probably worth understanding.
Yeah, my understanding is those chips are cheaper. They're 14 nanometer technology and they're LPU focused. So, but still, that's a huge.
Okay, let's say they're $10,000. It's
Exactly.
still a lot of money.
Still a lot of money. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that whatever, we've had this almost 100-year relationship with a dictatorship based on oil, but whatever. Here we are. They're strategic.
And we're seeding again. We're talking about the AI race, and we're so worried about China, but here we are, basically saying, "Oh yeah, but the Middle East is fine." So,
yeah, I think it is in America's interest to have Grok doing it. Although we'll see where Elon's national support is over time.
I don't know, Tim, but I was listening to you and thinking, I don't know about latency and an ability to actually train your models or use it remotely rather than being in the Middle East for a large company for cost reasons.
Yeah.
I
It
don't
may
know
be
that
fine, right? It could have some more global impact.
Right.
Where it's not an issue. Yep.
So that's why I would maybe elevate it to essential, because if we think it's feasible to actually use that center for model training, for testing, that might be, and it's potentially cost effective. They talk about in this article, they have access to resources, and they do, but not necessarily the right resources yet. So, but it's this potentially Singapore model where they can train people, and between the resources and the infrastructure availability, this can be a very interesting play, right, on the cost efficiency to get your stuff done, AI applications done. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, if you look at cluster development, the other things it's doing, I think, are stupid. The ribbon building that's going to have whatever 50 million people in it, and Neom, and they're doing a bunch of stupid stuff. People have more money than sense, but this is actually going to attract talent to come and build a data center and do stuff. I mean, this could be generative. I'm fine with essential. I mean, because these other this is one of the few outside of China power centers that the U.S. is going to support, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting place to live, because you could in 2 hours you can scout a lot of countries if you haven't been. So it will attract talent.
Yeah.
I'll just add though.
Guy. I'm sorry.
I'll also add it mentions in here that Grok's partnered with Aramco Digital.
Yeah.
And it says the new unit of Saudi Aramco. And I know we were reporting earlier this year about Saudi Aramco building their own model and training it on their own data. And this is the first I'd actually heard of Aramco Digital as an entity. And I am sure this is not the last we're going to be hearing of them.
Yeah.
And you look at first of all, they're the biggest energy company in the world. Second of all, energy is such an essential part of AI. So I think that, what they're going to discover, in the symbiosis between, the world's biggest energy company, the knowledge of how to do energy, and then the reasoning and inference on top of it with perhaps one of the world's cheapest inference centers. That's a powerful combination.
Okay.
I just wish it wasn't under a dictatorship from the 13th century, but that's where we are. All right. So what do we have for the big tote, Adam?
Oh, this is a day.
All right.
Yeah.
3 E's. Only one optional: runway with its late to market, announcement of an announcement, and the rest important or essential. A lot going on today. Big news day. Hope everybody found this useful. A lot of reading to do, although I think it's very engaging reading, easy reads. No academic papers in there for those of you who hate academic papers. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Don't forget to like and subscribe.